Just off the coast of Venezuela, you will find a twin island nation called Trinidad and Tobago. Its population is smaller than Goa, but its history stretches all the way to Bihar. And this week, Trinidad looked and sounded a lot like India. There were Bhojpuri songs, dhol beats, ministers in kurtas and food served on traditional sohari leaves. Yesterday, the Indian Prime Minister landed in the island nation. But Prime Minister Modi's visit to Trinidad and Tobago was no ordinary diplomatic trip. It was a celebration of the two intertwined cultures. Our next report tells you more.
So I spent the last couple of days watching the celebration that was going on in the beautiful twin island of Trinidad and Tobago. The celebration of the Prime Minister of India's arrival to Trinidad. Prime Minister Modi arriving to Trinidad, and the spectacle, the celebration. And as someone who understands and appreciates multiculturalism, living in the most multicultural city in the entire world for the past 15 years, I can appreciate the celebration of East Indian culture, because the reality is that India celebrates some of the richest culture. When you talk about food, when you talk about music and dance and drama, India celebrates some of the richest culture that you could ever find anywhere in the entire world. So I appreciated the culture, I appreciated the celebration that took place in Trinidad and Tobago. And I would want to believe that this visit from the Prime Minister of India should not divide Afro-Trinidadians and Indo-Trinidadians as much as the visit from the President of Nigeria to the OECS Caribbean nations should not divide people in that region, because what we have witnessed over the past 2 weeks is like two visits to the Caribbean from two powerhouses. India is an emerging powerhouse in the world, on the world stage, and so is Nigeria. And we saw in real time two visits to the Caribbean from these two leaders. And the same way, I don't think that the Nigerian president visit to St. Lucia should divide us in the Caribbean in terms of Africans versus non-Africans in the Caribbean. I don't think that Prime Minister Modi's visit should divide in Trinidad and Tobago Afro-Trinidadians and Indo-Trinidadians. But at the same time, I'm not going to sit here and discredit any Afro-Trinidadian who have a legitimate concern in the future of Trinidad and Tobago and this relationship between Trinidad and India. Because the reality is, like, I know India, there's some dark things about India. With good also comes bad. And I am aware of that. And it is very interesting that the reporter mentioned Goa, because Goa, a province in India, a few friends that I have, they're from Goa. And one of the things I know too well about the good, the bad, and the ugly in India. And the people brought up the caste system. I am aware of that system. I also grew up in an Indian community in Jamaica, so I know the dark side of it. I know the system there where a lot of people from Indian ancestry, they are not allowed to date outside of their race. In a lot of cases, when I was growing up in Jamaica in the 80s, there are a lot of East Indian young ladies in my community who could never date a black guy or any other guy in particular, whether black or Chinese. So I understand the system, and the same thing that you can say about India, we could argue the same thing about Nigeria. Nigeria also have what they would call a caste system, which is like a tribal system where there are tribes that don't get along. So that is a legitimate concern. But the thing is, I think the bigger concern is in the Caribbean is up to our politicians. That is the bigger concern. And what I see in Trinidad and Tobago as one of the major concerns is that Trinidad and Tobago cannot continue with two parties divided based on race. And what I'm seeing now is a PNM party that seems like it's the Black Party, and a UNC party that seems that is the Indo-Trinidadian party. And I believe that in Trinidad is more dangerous than a relationship with India, than a relationship with the United States of America, than a relationship with Nigeria. I believe that to get to a point where Trinidadians can see themselves as Trinidadians in a political sense, like where you're not voting for a party because the party identify as a Afro-Trinidadian party or a Indo-Trinidadian party. And I think that is the danger in Trinidad. That is more scary to me than any relationship with India. Because the reality is, when we talk about the bilateral trade deal between India and Trinidad and Tobago, and we saw that between 2023 and 2024, that over $360 million came in from that deal, you would have to understand that, look, this would benefit every single person in Trinidad and Tobago. This is not going to only benefit Indo-Trinidadians. And this, to me, like, this is much of nothing. And this is something that we should be celebrating, because at the beginning of this year, we're talking about the Trump administration, the disruption in the global market. And we have been having this conversation that the Caribbean countries need to reach outside of North America and to sign new deals with countries outside of America. Now we're seeing deals with India, we're seeing deals with Brazil, we're seeing deals with Mexico. And I believe that this could be better for the Caribbean going forward, signing these bilateral trade deals with countries outside of North America. Because if you know anything about global politics and just about the world in general, India, the Philippines, like places like China, those are some of the cheapest places in the world to live. Like, as I said, I have friends from Goa, and my friend, when they go back to Goa, and we're talking about how much money they would spend, like they could take like $200 and they could feed a big family for the entire month in Goa. And to me, I believe that we will benefit more from some of these trade deals in terms of, because the Caribbean, we have the highest food costs in the entire world in this region. When you go back anywhere, Jamaica, Barbados, St. Vincent, St. Kitts and Nevis, when you travel the Caribbean and you see some of these items on the grocery store shelf, like, it is crazy when you see them. So I believe that we can benefit from trading outside of North America. Brazil is also a place that is very cheap. Brazil, India, the Philippines. So this, as I said, is much of nothing, and we should embrace the different trade deals that is coming in the Caribbean.
That's Trinidad and Tobago, a twin-island Caribbean nation with a population smaller than Goa. If you squint hard enough, you might just see Patna. No, really, there's a Patna street in Trinidad. And yesterday it was echoing with the sound of Bhojpuri chautal and dhol beats. India's Prime Minister landed in Port of Spain for a diplomatic stop, but it felt less like a foreign visit and more like a homecoming. To understand how this visit to Trinidad and Tobago matters, you have to go back, way back, to 1845. That was the year that Fateh Razak sailed from Kolkata, then called Calcutta, carrying 225 indentured Indian labourers. It took them to a sugarcane plantation in what was then a British colony. Over the next few decades, nearly 150,000 Indians followed, many from Bhojpuri-speaking regions in Bihar and eastern Uttar Pradesh. They brought with them their language, food, religion, and resilience. What they didn't bring, they rebuilt from memory. Today, nearly 45% of Trinidad and Tobago's population is of Indian origin. Many still speak a version of Bhojpuri. They celebrate Diwali and worship at Hindu temples. PM Modi is the first Indian Prime Minister to visit Trinidad and Tobago since 1999. This visit focused on trade, energy, technology and culture. PM Modi received the Order of Trinidad and Tobago, the highest honour of the country. He also held talks with President Christine Carla Kangaloo and Prime Minister Kamala Prasad Bisesar. He even called the PM Bihar ki Beti, nodding to her roots in Buxar district. PM Modi also gifted her an Ayodhya temple replica and holy water from the Saryu river.
प्रधानमंत्री कमला जी के पूर्वज बिहार के बक्सर में रहा करते थे। कमला जी स्वयं वहां जाकर भी आई है। लोग इन्हें बिहार की बेटी मानते हैं। बिहार की विरासत भारत के साथ ही दुनिया का भी गौरव है। बिहार ने सदियों पहले दुनिया को ऐसे अनेक विषयों में नई दिशा दिखाई थी। मुझे विश्वास है 21वीं सदी की दुनिया के लिए भी बिहार की धरती से नई प्रेरणाएं, नए अवसर निकलेंगे।
At a state dinner, the Prime Minister was served on sahari leaves. That is traditional Bhojpuri-style plates made from sal leaves, still used at weddings and religious events in Bihar. So the food was Indian, the leaf was Bhojpuri, and the symbolism was unmistakable. But beyond the pageantry, the visit had strategic undertones. Trinidad and Tobago, with its booming energy sector, is one of the most developed economies in the Caribbean. It's also a crucial gateway to Latin America and a bridge to the African diaspora. India and Trinidad already share a most favoured nation trade agreement. Bilateral trade crossed $368 million in 2023-2024. Cars, pharmaceuticals, plastics. It exports fuels, bitumen and aluminium. Earlier this year, Trinidad and Tobago became the first Caribbean nation to adopt India's Unified Payments Interface, or UPI. And now, sixth-generation Indian origin citizens in Trinidad can apply for OCI cards. That is the Overseas Citizenship of India cards. All thanks to a policy announced during Modi's visit.
And my very first engagement is with the Indian community here. It feels completely natural. After all, we are part of one family. The journey of the Indian community in Trinidad and Tobago is about courage. The circumstances your ancestors faced would have broken even the strongest spirits, but they faced hardships with hope.
So Trinidad and Tobago may be far away from Patna, but during Modi's visit, it didn't feel like it. It felt like a full-circle moment, 179 years in the making. For Trinidad, it was recognition, but for India, it was a reunion.